And we're live.
All right, thank you. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our regular council meeting for February the 22nd, 2021. Officially call the meeting to order and ask that you stand for the playing of the national anthem if you're able. This time, we would also like to take the opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Chippewa, and the people of the Three Fires Confederacy. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest tonight from any member of council? No? Okay. So the first item on the agenda is a development charges public meeting, which is being held pursuant to the Development Charges Act. And council will be receiving a presentation from Hemson Consulting regarding proposed development charge rates and policies that relate to provision of library as well as parks and recreation services to be applied town-wide in the town of Shelburne. It's proposed that enactment of a development charges bylaw by council would occur on a date subsequent to tonight's public meeting. Council is required under the Development Charges Act to hold at least one public meeting to allow the public an opportunity to review and provide comments on the development charges background study, the related staff reports, and the proposed development charges bylaw. I'll now ask the clerk for the method of notice regarding tonight's public meeting.
Notice of tonight's public meeting was advertised in local media sources as of January 28, 2021. Notice was posted on the town's website and social media sites as of January 25th, 2021.
Any person may participate in the public meeting and make written or verbal representation either in support of or in opposition to the bylaw. Written submissions were invited to be directed to the clerk by February 17th, 2021. Written comments that were received prior to the meeting, as well as submissions made this evening at the public meeting, will be considered by council prior to the enactment of the new development charges bylaw. Copies of the 2021 development charges background study, as well as the subsequent draft bylaw, are available on the town's website, which is shelburne.ca. And with that, I would like to welcome Craig Binning and Natalia Kelvis from Hemson Consulting, who will walk us through the report.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council, and public listening in this evening. It's a pleasure to be before you this evening. My colleague Natalia is going to walk us through the presentation, but just to re-stress, as the mayor indicated in his introduction, this focus of this development charges update is looking at library, parks, and recreation. Those of you who've been active in the town over the last year or so will know that we have gone through a process of updating what we'll refer to as the engineered service and the protection service components of the town's development charge bylaws. But due to legislative changes and also the impacts of COVID, we waited to update this portion of the town's development charges through to this process. So with that brief introduction, I'll just pass it over to Natalia, and we'd be pleased to answer any questions at the end of the formal presentation.
Great, thanks Craig, and again thank you to council for having us this evening. As the mayor had mentioned, the purpose of today's meeting is to meet the requirements of Section 12 of the Development Charges Act. The purpose is to provide the public with an opportunity to make representation and provide any comments on the 2021 Development Charges Background Study and bylaw. As mentioned, the study has been made publicly available, as well as the bylaw in accordance with the legislation. Today's presentation is fairly brief. Craig mentioned that the study is related to 2 services. Previously, this was 3 services. In the 2021 DC background study, we have combined indoor recreation and parks. We generally feel that the services would be better delivered, not delivered, but would be better charged as a single charge, and that would give the town flexibility in using those funds between the 2 services. Through the presentation today, we're just going to cover some background information and the current DCs in the town. We'll go through the study process, which was used to arrive at the calculated charges you'll see later in the presentation. We'll have a summary of the actual capital program that is informing the rates and the rates themselves, as well as a comparison with some other municipalities. And lastly, we'll just provide a brief update on the timeline and any outstanding steps. As Craig mentioned, the council has passed 4 development charge bylaws over the last year. In 2020, this includes the town-wide hard services, the school road area specific development charges, east area specific charges, as well as the west area charges. Currently under effect, under the transitional rules of the Planning Act, the town continues to levy charges under Bylaw 31/2015. This relates to the library.
Sorry to interrupt, but we're not seeing the slide deck. I don't know if are you sharing it? Or
my apologies. Let's try switching that over. Jennifer, I don't know if you're able to help. I've lost the ability to share my screen. I'm not sure if we've gone live and that's still gone away. If it's possible, if you could share your screen and I could direct it.
Okay, just give me 1 second while I pull it up.
Okay, thanks.
Can you see that now?
yes, we can.
Okay.
Perfect. My apologies. Thanks very much, Jennifer, for quickly responding. If we could move over to slide 3, I believe, or 4. This one, perfect. So just as I was mentioning, that currently the town levies its library, parks and recreation, indoor recreation under the Planning Act. That's the transitional rules that were provided by the provincial government. And as part of this update, those are the 3 services, and now we're becoming 2 services that Craig mentioned we are looking at under this development charges background study. So on the next slide, perfect, thank you. As you'll see, that this is largely because of legislative changes why we held off on doing the soft services, as we call them. This background study is only related to those 2 services. And as a note, under the bylaw 2015-31 or 31/2015, parking services is continued to be levied as it is permitted under the Planning Act and will continue to be levied until one of the earlier days of either the bylaw being repealed, a CBC bylaw being passed, a community benefits charges bylaw being passed under the Planning Act, or September 18th, 2022. And that's just part of the legislation of the Planning Act for the transitional rules. Yes, on the next slide. Thank you. You've seen this slide before, we've presented to council, but just to reiterate, the background study itself is a rigorous process and includes multiple steps. The first one being a development forecast. It has been updated since the 2020 study, as the capital program is now based on a 2021 to 2030 planning horizon. We've included a calculation of the 10-year historical service levels for both of the service areas. We've also identified the growth-related capital needs for both of the service areas and done the necessary statutory deductions, which includes the grants and other contributions, any shares that are replacement or benefit to existing. We've accounted for the available DC reserves, and where applicable, we've attributed a share to post-period benefit, which is eligible for recovery, but not within the 10-year planning period for this study. For this specific study, because the library, indoor recreation, and parks are entirely related to residential development, the costs are 100% levied under the residential sector on a per unit basis, and there is no change to the non-residential sector through this study process. We've included in the background study operating and asset management plan impact analysis, which can be seen on the town's website. Next slide. Perfect. So we provided a brief summary of the capital costs. Details of the projects are included once again in the background study. As you can see, library services, the total cost is about $600,000, and the total DC recovery amount is $320,000. Some of the non-DC fundable relates to your current reserves, and I believe there's no grants or the subsidies identified for library services. For Parks and Recreation, you'll see that the total cost is at $9.8 million, and the DC recovery in the 10-year period is $6 million. With that included in the non-DC fundable are some benefit to existing shares, as well as some of the DC reserves that are in a positive balance. The Parks and Recreation capital program does exceed the funding envelope that was calculated as part of this process, and that is amounting to about $800,000, which will be considered for recovery through future DC background studies. The projects that were included, just as a summary, once again, the details are included in the study. For the library is a provision of a pop-up satellite branch, as well as a mobile library and additional collection materials. For Parks and Recreation, there's a provision for indoor recreation facility. Additional equipment is needed for servicing development, parks facilities, as well as development of parks, trails and related facilities, and as well as some studies. Next slide. As you can see on slide 7, these are the draft 2021 calculated residential development charges. These are the charges that relate in the box, in the green box, that relate to the services only, and those in the gold or yellow box that are the total charges that include the town-wide hard service charges that were calculated in 2020 and passed in 2020. As you can see, most of the charges related to Parks and Recreation are largely due to the funding envelope. The delivery of that service enables a charge that is of about $7,800 for a single and semi-detached home. For library, that's about $415, and the total calculated charge for soft services is at about $8,250. We've listed the rates for all of the unit types, and once again, just to reiterate, there is no change to the non-residential development charge as part of this background study. The fully calculated charge in the gold box below does include parking, as mentioned, as permissible under the Planning Act to continue to be levied. Next slide. We've provided a comparison with the current and the calculated residential development charge. Combined under the Parks and Recreation in your current charge is once again those two separate services that are now together. As you'll see, your total fully serviced charge of $5,964 is the current charge for a single detached unit for soft services. The calculated rate is at the $8,250, and the increase is at about $2,285. Once again, these are current rates as of February 2021, and it's only related to the residential, so we have not provided a comparison for the non-residential rates. And next slide. What we've done here is we've taken the fully calculated rates from 2020 as well as the ones in 2021. In the red boxes, you'll see that it doesn't really move the town up or down in the comparison list that we've provided here. Largely you remain in the same spot, just above mono and just below Clearview. And the next slide, and I believe it's the last one, mentioned is a fairly brief presentation, but just to reiterate the project timeline, I want to thank town staff as well as their consultants for all the work in putting this together. We started working on it in late last year once the legislation had been proclaimed. We had done all the work really in the last months of 2020. We've done the forecast, the inventories, as well as the capital program as part of the process. As mentioned, the background study was published on January 8th. We've advertised for the public meeting in accordance with the legislation. The bylaws have been posted online since February 8th. Today is February 22nd, and we are holding the statutory public meeting. And the last step is March 8th is the anticipated date of council's passage of the bylaw. And with that concludes my presentation, and we'd be pleased to take any questions from council or the public.
Thanks, Natalia. We'll start with members of council. Are there any questions? No. Okay. Jennifer, are there any members of the public logged on for questions?
No, there is no one. We had one person register, but they've not logged in.
Okay. And just to be clear, Natalia, I know you said this a couple of times, but for any member of our development community who is logged in, these particular soft services only apply to the residential sphere. So somebody building a commercial or industrial building won't have to worry about these charges, right? Okay. Last call for questions from council. Were there any letters submitted or anything else from the public that we should be aware of?
Yeah, just to note to council and to you, Mr. Mayor, there were 2 letters received. One was received, I believe last week or the week before, from Joe Bojan, and a response has been provided to him. Earlier today, we received a letter from Bousfields representing Plato Developments. We haven't yet formulated a response to them, but we will be providing one either later this week or early next week.
All right. Okay, well, if there are no questions from council, then can I get a motion to receive the development charge presentation as presented? Councillor Hall, seconded by Councillor Buffett. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. All right, thank you guys.
It's our pleasure. Have a good evening.
Take care. Okay, so we don't have any minutes to review this evening. Public question period. Jennifer, I understand there were no questions submitted for this evening?
Not for this evening.
Okay. No presentations, no deputations, so that takes us to council inquiries. I have a couple, but does anybody else have anything on their mind? No? Okay. Couple of good news stories. Some of you may have seen the town of Shelburne was the recipient of an Economic Development Association of Canada Marketing Social Media Award. And that was in recognition of the hashtag Support the Burn video. So kudos to our Economic Development Coordinator, Carol Maitland, and the rest of her EDC team, as well as the creative mastermind, Tristan Barracks, who actually produced the film. If you haven't seen it, I think it's still floating around Facebook, but in any event, it's always nice to get some recognition at the national level for some of our local efforts. Denise?
Mayor Mills, I'll send this evening the link to the award information, which has all of the video links as well as the promotional profile and everything that was included in the nomination submission and the announcement today that we received the award.
Excellent. Okay. And secondly, another piece of positive info, Wellington, Dufferin, Guelph Public Health is reporting today that there are currently 0 active cases of COVID-19 among Shelburne residents. We've sort of been floating around in the single digits for the last number of weeks, but it's certainly nice to see that big goose egg on the scoreboard. Hopefully we can keep it there, but at least for the time being, that's good news, and I think speaks volumes to the level of commitment that we've seen from our community in trying to address this. So Keep up the good work. All right, if there are no other inquiries, we'll get going on the balance of the regular agenda. So the first item is a report from our CAO regarding the final report from the Dufferin County Service Delivery Review. The report's in the agenda, but Denise, do you want to speak to that briefly?
Certainly, through your worship, I'm just waiting for it to load up on my screen. We're just a bit quicker than I anticipated. So I can speak to it without reading it. So the background generally is that the County of Dufferin was successful in receiving a grant application to do a Part A and Part B service delivery review. The part that's applicable to the town of Shelburne include the service areas that were evaluated as part of their analysis through the consulting firm that they hired for the grant. Council was presented with the summary of that presentation in December, and the final report, which is fairly significant, it's about 89 pages, is provided to you in the attachments. The recommendations are specific with respect to the process that council would undertake in the next steps, and it is up to each individual municipality and their council to move forward with any recommendations that were provided and determine what, if any, you would like to see moved forward. Additionally, these particular recommendations, and I've highlighted the ones that are italicized under the report that are extracted specific to two service areas that were included in the scope of analysis, and specifically governance. That was indoor recreation and fire services. Likewise, council had directed staff through your council strategic priorities to not only complete a service delivery review, which is included in our 2021 budget for $25,000. You had included the list of a target within the priorities under municipal services review and evaluation to specifically review municipal services as those which are delivered by third-party boards and complete a governance review. So this particular report addresses specifically two areas of service that would otherwise have been undertaken by the town as well, and would have been costs that we incurred for governance. So I've outlined that there's an opportunity for us through you as council to continue that discussion, recommending that it be looked at on March the 15th for a special meeting. To provide additional background, recognizing that most of council will have this information, but to ensure that the public is aware of it. In addition to the report from Optimus for the county, you have been provided with the current and proposed agreements affecting those two service areas. The agreement from 1994 is what governs the Shelburne District Recreation Center. And additionally, the agreement for 1991 is what is currently in place for the Shelburne District Fire Department, with the recognition that there was a new agreement provided in 2020, which at this time the town of Shelburne is still reviewing and has not yet signed. So I'm not going to go through all the recommendations as they were presented by the consultant in December to council. I will note as well that the town will be applying to enhance or supplement so that the budget for the SDR is covered to the second intake program for the province's modernization program. And the timelines is that the report has to be completed and it has to be provided by a third-party independent consultant or firm by the end of November 2021. And the deadline for that is March the 6th. So we'll be moving forward with that. At the same time, in 2021, we have a very comprehensive Parks and Recreation Master Plan that we will initiate. And many of the recommendations from the county's SDR have relevance to our Parks and Recreation planning and the strategies that we would be looking at, and particularly engagement initiatives that would be provided to our community to allow them to provide input into what they want to see for Parks and Recreation, and that would include indoor recreation. Additionally, it's important to note that the fundamental role that Parks, Recreation, and Culture play in enhancing a diversified community and providing many opportunities was a fairly strong series of recommendations within the Anti-Black, Anti-Racism and Discrimination Task Force. So we would see that those recommendations would also be really relevant to the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, as well as Council's review on the 15th of March. There are a number of appendices just for information purposes, but that really summarizes the report, with the most important, I guess, recommendation being the suggestion that Council regroup on March the 15th for a special meeting to provide you with more opportunity to review what was recommended through the county's consultants and to provide staff with direction and next steps, as it really does affect the scope and the analysis of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, as well as what would be included as additional next steps for our own service delivery review in 2021. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the CAO? So essentially, we're just looking to come back on the 15th, set aside some time dedicated that night just to review this, and particularly the recommendations as they relate to board governance in the recreation and fire realms. So I guess mark those in your calendar then, and we'll have that discussion in a couple of weeks. So if there are no questions, can I get a motion to approve or receive rather the CAO's report and confirm the special meeting for March 15th? Councillor Buffett, seconded by, everybody's shy tonight. Councillor Fegan, all in favor? Carried. All right. So next is a report from the treasurer regarding the 2020 development charge year-end report and Carrie's attestation. So this is kind of standard form stuff, right, Carrie? But do you want to just kind of explain why we have to go through this motion?
Sure, thank you. And through the mayor, this is an annual report that is a requirement of the Development Charges Act. And the attachment summarizes the funds that were collected through development charges in 2020, as well as the funds that were expended. The majority of the money that was used for in development charges was to pay down long-term debt in the water and the sewer departments. And then we also withdrew an amount to assist with covering the development charges study that has been ongoing for some time now because of the changes in the legislation. And the majority of what was collected, you will see, is residential, and approximately $3.9 million, and it was mostly through Highland Village subdivision.
Any questions for the treasurer? Okay. Can I get a motion to receive that report then and receive the 2020 development charge schedule as presented? Moved by Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Hull. All in favor? Carried. All right, next is a report from our clerk regarding the proposed County of Dufferin tow truck licensing bylaw.
So thank you, through your worship. At the November 9th, 2020 council meeting, council had chosen to support the development of a uniform tow truck licensing bylaw throughout the County of Dufferin, in that Orangeville would establish a licensing and enforcement program. And so resulting from those resolutions from our surrounding municipalities also supporting the program, Orangeville Council viewed a report from staff on January 11th, 2021. It's attached as Appendix 2 to my report. That report outlines the stages, costs associated, and timeline for bylaw development and implementation of a tow truck licensing and enforcement program. So the report also notes an impact to the town of Orangeville in the amount of $10,900. And their recommendation is that if any Dufferin County local municipality opts to have the town of Orangeville develop the uniform licensing bylaw on their behalf, that they contribute $1,000 towards the cost. And so with the town of Shelburne having 2 major highways incorporated into our roadway system, staff are recommending that Shelburne opt in to further participate and have the town of Orangeville develop the new tow truck licensing bylaw and program. To opt into the program, the cost is $1,000. The $1,000 contribution was not included in the 2021 budget. The contribution can be funded through the bylaw department line item noted in the financial impact section of my report. And that's a quick overview. I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
Okay. Any questions for the clerk? No? Okay. We get a motion to receive that report then, as well as opting into having the town of Orangeville develop the bylaw and an authorization for staff to forward the amount of $1,000 for that service. Councillor Hall, seconded by Councillor Buffett. All in favor? Carried. Okay. Next is another report from the clerk regarding amendments to the user fee and charges bylaw.
Thank you, through your worship. In March 2019, Council had reviewed a report from myself regarding user fees and charges at that time, and had directed staff undertake a comprehensive review of Parks, Recreation, and Facilities user fees and charges in preparation for the 2021 budget. Staff has not had the opportunity to conduct that review as of yet, and while review will commence regarding the service delivery review and board governance, as well as the Parks and Rec master plan and the Grace Tippling Hall revitalization project. We've chosen to hold off on that comprehensive review until all of those projects have been completed. And one thing we wanted to capture, and after year-end reconciliation, was in regards to our planning application fees. The year-end reconciliation did set off a few red flags that indicated that we were not collecting planning fees on a cost recovery basis, which is what is, as per the Planning Act, is supposed to be collected. So the majority of this bylaw is really to incorporate an increase in planning application fees in the amount of 5%. There is a 2% cost of living increase incorporated into some of the rental for facilities. So for example, Schedule B, to give some context to the increase, rental of the Ball Diamonds Diamond A for adults is a 30-cent increase. Rental with lights is a $1 increase, and a tournament per day is $2 increase. So not significant, but still somewhat of an increase. So that's a basic overview. We've incorporated a 2% cost of living into facilities, as well as the 5% increase for planning fees. And I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
Questions on that? Councillor Wagner.
Yes, thank you. I guess I don't know if this would relate or not. What are we looking at with restrictions for renting out the diamonds and things like that? I know that there's been some people that have already potentially said, hey, when are registrations starting for baseball? And I've kind of personally held off with, moving forward with the junior schooners because I'm not sure when we're actually allowed to rent the diamonds.
Jennifer, yeah.
Yes, we have been contacted by local user groups, but to rent some of the facilities. However, that protocol is based on what the provincial requirements are at the time, and with an unknown factor of where we'll be and what stage of the framework we'll be in at that time. It's really just wait and see to see what happens and where we're at and what stage we're in. But we have been contacted. We have reserved spots for user groups. Their normal play schedules have been submitted. It's just anticipation of not wanting or when we will know what stage of framework we're in at that point in time.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, and anybody else? No. Can I get a motion then to receive that report, as well as leave for the reading and enacting of bylaw number 9-2021, being the bylaw to amend user fees and charges? Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Wagner. All in favor? It's carried. All right, next is a bylaw authorizing signature by myself and the clerk, I believe it is, for the agreement for the provision of policing services through the OPP. So this is just a formality to authorize us to enter into that contract. So the motion reads, be it resolved that leave be given for the reading and enacting of bylaw number 7-2021, being a bylaw to authorize the signing of an agreement with Her Majesty the Queen for the provision of policing services within the town of Shelburne. Get a mover and seconder for that one. Councillor Hall, seconded by Councillor Fegan. All in favor? It's carried. All right. And lastly is a bylaw authorizing us to enter into an agreement with the Shelburne Public Library for the purpose of providing library services. So Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think legislatively we're required to have an agreement with at least one public library to provide services. Obviously, we contract with our own library to do that.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So the motion reads, be it resolved that leave be given for the reading and enacting of bylaw number 8-2021, being a bylaw to enter into an agreement with the Shelburne Public Library for the purpose of providing library services. Mover and seconder, Councillor Hall, seconded by Councillor Wagner. All in favor? It's carried as well. Thank you. Any notices of motion for this evening? Deputy Mayor Anderson.
So this is actually not a notice of motion, so I apologize for misusing this opportunity. This probably should have been brought up during the council inquiries, but in any event, there are two items that I just want to mention very briefly. One, and this is more so not for council, but for the viewers that are tuning in. I know that members of the public seem to be concerned that maybe council did not appreciate to the full extent the service provided by SPS, our Shelburne Police Service, for the mere fact that maybe they didn't see a parade or something that they felt that council should have done. And I just wanted to be clear to the public that by no means that we do not care and value the service of our Shelburne Police. I know Council Fegan had brought up an idea as to how we can honor the service of those individuals. I do want to let the public know that at the appropriate time, whether it is through council or the Police Services Board, that the Shelburne Police will be honored appropriately. So that's number one. And whether somebody else wants to speak on that, it's up to your accord. But the other thing I wanted to ask, and this is for staff, is regarding the DNI applications. I just wanted to get a sense of, you guys have done a fantastic job of really circulating that throughout social media. I just wanted to get a sense of whether the applications are robust at this point in time, or are you seeing what I would consider positive feedback by way of applications?
Through your worship, I can answer that question. No applications have been received as of yet, and the cutoff to apply is this Friday.
Sorry, you said no applications?
No.
So I guess maybe we should, and to your point, Deputy Mayor, yeah, I mean, I have seen it go out several times on the town's social media channels. So I guess, you know, maybe if each of us could do a little more to try to get that disseminated, Denise.
Through your worship, because Jennifer had made me aware of the fact that there were no applications as of today, we would be advising council of two things: to potentially extend the deadline. We have done, I think, a fairly comprehensive promotion of the opportunity to volunteer and be a part of this working group and committee. And potentially a couple of more weeks of continued promotion might be beneficial. Or we have to look at another scenario to determine who will be appointed to this committee in the future. And that was supposed to be done on the 8th of March at your next meeting.
Maybe we're just gonna have to go knock on some doors. I'm sorry, this is happening all in real time, but I can't hide the shock on my face. I'm stunned that that's the case. But I would encourage those who are watching today or now, or certainly those who are going to be watching the recording later on, that this is an instrumental portfolio of the town to really help shape the town moving forward. And so I can only encourage the public to consider submitting an application. But I think, I know I have, and I believe others have as well, have circulated this on social media. So it's not for a lack of effort, that's for sure. But I guess whatever else we could do, we'll do it.
Do you need anything from us formally to extend, like even just for a week?
Well, even for the weekend, Mayor Mills, if there's going to be an outreach, I mean, then Friday's really not probably going to provide enough people with the time, at least the weekend. And if it was closing Monday, and we would need council to direct us to extend the deadline, and we will re-promote that new information.
Jennifer?
Can I possibly recommend we extend the deadline for 1 week? And so while it'll probably push back council's reconciliation of the applications received, probably by a week or two, maybe if we extend it 1 week, we may perhaps obtain more applications.
Is everybody okay with that? I mean, I certainly am. I would rather, I mean, if we lose a week or two in the grand scheme of things, I rather would do that and give, people an opportunity to actually, get their applications in. Do you want a formal resolution or is just direction okay?
Just a direction would be appreciated so that we amend the deadline.
Sure. In that case, then, is anybody opposed to extending for a week? Okay. Why don't we do that? And in the meantime, if each of us could try to reach out to some people who, we think may be interested in pursuing this and hopefully get some applications in. I'm sure we will, but everybody's busy, and it's one of those things that, dates on a calendar can come and go before you know it. So, okay. And to the deputy mayor's earlier point, that was a good one. In terms of the police, I know that I fielded a few inquiries as to, the lack of a formal handover ceremony on Thursday when police services transitioned to OPP. And I mean, it certainly was not for a lack of wanting to do that. But the reality was that, given the number of moving parts involved and the number of people that would have been involved in that sort of thing, those plans would have had to have been set prior to us knowing what the status was with the lockdown situation. So we made the decision in conjunction with OPP to hold off on doing any sort of formal ceremony right now. And instead, what we're looking at is doing a homecoming event for our officers when they return from OPP Academy. I've spoken to a couple of them actually today who are up in Aurelia. They've started their training in earnest today. So in a couple of weeks' time, they'll be back in their new uniforms. And with the officers that I've spoken with, they actually seem to prefer that approach as opposed to something last Thursday. So, despite that, I think some people were disappointed, but, it's a tricky time. And the reality is that, asking our very same officers who are charged with the responsibility of enforcing provincial orders to gather in contravention of those orders just, simply isn't good form. And would have put all of them, including, some fairly high-ranking OPP officials, including the commissioner, perhaps in a difficult situation that we didn't want to do. So anyways, stay tuned, and as soon as a date's set for the homecoming celebration, we'll get that out there. Any notices of motion then before we move on to communications? No, okay. So there are 15 items of communication listed in the package. Anything that anybody wants to discuss separately? No, okay. Can I get a motion then to receive those items collectively? Councillor Buffett, seconded by Councillor Hall. All in favor? It's carried. No closed session. Can I get a mover and seconder for the confirming bylaw? Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Hall. All in favor? And finally, motion to adjourn. Councillor Wagner, seconded by Councillor Hall. We're going to be done before our regular start time. All in favor? That's carried. All right.